Stephen, Evan, you're both researchers and authors of a number of books relating to human origins in Australia. How did you both get into this subject in the first place?
Well, from my point of view, it's because I've been working as a teacher for the last 25, 30 years with Aboriginal people, working in areas like Moree, where there was a large population of Aboriginal people, and also writing curriculum. I was involved in making up the AB Studies program for New South Wales. And over a period of time, we started to hear more and more of their story, and they started to share more with us. And it became, in the end, a decision about whether I kept teaching or started carrying on and chasing up what they were giving us. So it was really a matter of 25 years of a gradual process.
So did you find that what you were having to teach in Aboriginal studies was in conflict with what you were hearing directly from the Aboriginal communities?
Utterly, completely. You see, I was involved in the rewrite a couple of years ago, and by that stage I knew that nearly everything there was wrong. And I fronted the guy that actually was the head for the whole of the state. And I basically told him to let me go home after the first day. I couldn't stay anymore. They had completely lost the plot. It was a history course. It had nothing to do with culture. And the original people weren't being asked. So, yeah, definitely.
Interesting. So you've both been working tirelessly to really change our worldview regarding the belief that Homo sapiens originated out of Africa and came to Australia about 50, 60,000 years ago. Can you explain a bit about what your theory is regarding the origins of Homo sapiens?
Well, to begin with, we've got to make a point. We actually don't have a theory. The elders give us our information and they give us direction, and what our job is, and an elder that gave me initiation made it clear, our job under the banner of Mutation, which is black fella, white fella dreaming, is to find the truths that they actually gave us. So what we claim is not what we claim. What the elders insist is that the first Homo sapiens began in Australia. And yes, they sailed from Australia, but they began a lot earlier than what we even think. Now, what people don't know is that the people originally involved in the out of Africa theory, and I have it alongside me. This is actually the paper all scribbled on, of course.
By Wilson and Kahn.
Wilson and Kahn are the two genetic molecular geneticists who came up with the theory of Eve and out of Africa. What people don't know, in their paper they said probably. That's really important. Not definitely, but it is definite, isn't it? We'd think that. And secondly, they made their calculations on the timing by looking at Australia. Now, that's very important because one of the assumptions they made was that the mitochondrial DNA, which is the genes that women pass on from generation to generation, which is very reliable, unlike the men's Y chromosomes, which are very erratic, but that's a different story. What actually happens is it's been passed on from generation to generation. These guys said, well, the original people are much younger. They're 1/3 the time, the genetic diversity of other groups, and they've been there 60,000 years. Therefore, Eve was 180 to 200,000 years ago. See how that all works out? What people don't know, and it's not our theory, it's theirs, they both recanted. Both Wilson and Kahn, within 10 years, had said, we got it wrong. It's Australia. Now, that's the important part of this story, and that's where we've got to start it from. Kahn was the first one. She got the mitochondrial DNA of 112 tribal people from 26 tribes and got 12 from Australia. And she said, my God, it's all wrong. What she found was, and there's a very important clue in this, two things. Mutation rate of Australian Aboriginal people was much higher, much higher. And she said they came about 400,000 years ago.
Incredible.
Right, well before the others. And the Asian race, the African race, and the European race came about much later, like 100,000 and 40,000 years. And what she said was the Africans came around 40,000 years ago. Now that means that's 10 times older, not 1/3 younger. They're out by a factor of 30.
And that's amazing because you don't hear anything about the fact that they recanted that original study, and so much scientific research has followed on based on that original theory, not based on the revision a decade later.
There's a reason why, but there is a reason why, because you've got to remember there were two people involved in this paper, weren't there, Adam?
Yeah.
Now, the first one was a male and the second one was a female. So guess who is the main presenter of this paper? It's Alan Wilson. Rebecca Cann don't count, right? Okay, Wilson came down to Australia. And now what he did is he came down twice, in 87 and 89, and he sampled, on the first occasion, 21 different full descent original people coming from 4 regions and found 15 different mutations. He got shocked and came down a second time and did another sample in 89 of 10 and got 7 different mutations, which now means he's got 22 different mutations. Now, that's very important. And if I can explain why, April, mitochondrial DNA gets 1 mutation every 3,500 years. That's their mass, not mine. Well, 22 times, that's 77,000 years. In his original paper, he said they were here for 50,000 years. And then he made a very important point. He said, what if I sample more? Will the rate stay at 71%? And his answer was definitely. So what he did was, he then said this, and this is public record. This is what makes you think, why didn't it get out? It goes something very close to this because I've used it so many times. It might seem too far out to admit, but while Homo erectus was muddling around in the rest of the world, a few erectus got to Australia and did something dramatically different, not even with stone tools. For it is here in Australia that Homo sapiens first emerged and evolved 400,000 years ago. He then said exactly what Rebecca Cann said. But here's the interesting part of this whole equation, because it's not finished. Cann said they evolved from 2 lineages. Now, here's the trick. One is Homo erectus. But if they got to Australia, there's no other hominids here. And that creates a huge problem. Now, if I can stick up for the men, the Y chromosomes that we carry, they did one study of that, and you know what they found? The rest of the world's we've got 41 different types of haplotypes, which are chromosomes, Y chromosomes, and it's spread evenly. In Australia, 78% were found in 2 groups, and what was more important was there were unique lineages that they had nowhere else, and it came from 2 lineages again. They said there's 2 groups here. Now, we've got a problem here. We've got to think about this a bit. We've got 2 lineages here. One is Homo erectus, they reckon got here 400,000 years ago, and that's how we've got Homo sapien. I can take that. But the clue seems to be, what's the other lineage? And if I can finish, I know that genetics is boring, but it does make a very important scientific point. And I'll tell you why Wilson was ignored. Around the same time that Wilson was here, they started doing mitochondrial DNA work on the oldest Homo sapien on the planet, which comes from Lake Mungo Man. And what they found is they took the mitochondrial DNA from his body, 60,000 years old, and found the mitochondrial DNA was unique and extinct. Now we've got a problem. This one is the closest to the supposed African. 60,000 years, when they get here, 60,000 years ago. The gene should be exact. In fact, what they said was they called it an extinct gene because they didn't know where to put it. It doesn't relate to any other gene in this planet. So this is what we...
So how was that explained at the time?
It wasn't.
It was just left as a mystery.
Wilson did something very inconvenient. After he published his second findings, he died that year. So you don't have the male of this paper now pushing that point of view. Mm-hmm. What do they do with that information? They just ignore it now because it's inconvenient. It doesn't fit. The same way when this stuff came out about WLH3 having an extinct gene, they just said, oh, it must have been a weird mutation we can't explain. But they're not putting all the information together. So what it means is this. It's not actually our theory. All we've done is collected all this other scientific evidence and said, well, hang on, we've got the word unique, we've got the word extinct, and we've got 2 lineages. We can get Homo erectus here, but there's something else going on in this country here that doesn't fit. Now, that's the first part of the story. So what we worked out from that is you can just forget the out of Africa theory. The most genetically diverse race on this planet are the original people.
If you can just explain what the elders have said about this.
Okay. everything began here, everything will end here, and everything will begin again here. The other is I have the bloodlines of all the peoples on the planet running through my veins. And this is the center, the creation place. Everything drifted away from here.
Gosh, that's interesting. So this has been supported not only by scientific evidence, but also the actual Aboriginal mythology and directly from the elders are supporting this.
Oh, definitely. Look, when they say all other peoples of the world come from us, they say this because in their dreaming, their creation spirits are called sky heroes, not gods, but sky heroes. And they say they made them. They come from here. They don't come from somewhere else. And they're very insistent about that. And you'll find them as mythology with the Hopi, with a lot of other people who've spoken to elders throughout the planet. They all know these are the first people. This is part of the story.
It's really interesting because you do hear this reference through so many cultures to the sky gods, you know, that we came from the sky gods. Now this links in with what you were saying about the two lineages and that we know one, which is Homo erectus. Can you explain about this second lineage and how that relates to these so-called sky gods written about in ancient mythology?
The second lineage, it begins with something called the Seven Sisters, which is the one dreaming story you'll find in this country that runs across 500 tribal boundaries but has exactly the same players, the same mythology and the same place. The Seven Sisters represent Pleiades, and the other sister is the eighth player in this is from Orion. Now, this is where they come from. We know elders. I've spoken to elders who stood in front of me and said, our ancestors come from Pleiades. That's where we come from. They will tell me now, when I was doing this, they said, well, okay, you've got one lineage. We'll tell you the other. It's Pleiades. So that is part of their story also. I have spoken to so many elders. We've gone down the UFO Pleiades path very reluctantly. You'll find in 20 articles we wrote for the National Indigenous Times, we didn't mention it. It's not in our first 3 books. It's in the ones coming out. We don't have a choice. They keep saying the same thing. So that is the other player in this game. It is why the Egyptians came to this country. And what we've found is archaeology now that proves both the Egyptians were here, and now we're finding archaeology that proves that some other earlier civilization, most likely extraterrestrial, also here.
So does that suggest then that there was actually an interbreeding between Homo erectus and an extraterrestrial race, or do you think it was something different, perhaps even suggesting that an extraterrestrial was involved in manipulating genetics?
If we go to the walls of Carrion, which we've been to and think we've been down there probably 20 times now, that's where we started our work. Between 3 sandstone walls are 300 glyphs. They've been called fake, they've been called everything under the sun, deliberately so, but we know they're genuine. And there are 2 narratives there. The first one is an Egyptian story about Nefer-Djeb and Neferturu that came here about 4,600 years ago. The second one is what the Arnie Bev Spears called the original language, which comes before hieroglyphs, the language that they were writing down that was given to them.
And can that be deciphered?
Yeah, we've just finished it. We've just finished it. It's coming out in one of the books. We're putting 5 chapters and we've put a full deciphering of it. Now, the interesting part of that deciphering is that people have said it's a fake, it's an amalgam. What it actually is one sandstone wall is about 85% the oldest type of hieroglyphs, Egyptian hieroglyphs. And we think that's the chronicle of the Egyptian when they came here. The other 260 are a much ancient story, and it begins with genetic manipulation. The first panel, the first 25 glyphs are all about it. The very first glyph on that wall is a stick figure with just a normal stick figure. It's not an Egyptian glyph. It represents the beginning of man. And you will see through the first panel, there is one glyph there, which is 3 circles. Now, in Proto-Egyptian, which is the oldest form of glyph, there is only one set of 3 circles. That means chemical. Here, the 3 circles are stacked on top of one another, and it begins with 2 legs. Further down, it's 2 legs, and then it's got 2 arms. Further down, 2 legs, 2 arms, and then a pyramid in each arm. Then further down again in the same narrative, we see a woman that's pregnant, and alongside there's a laboratory. We think we see a narrative there about genetic manipulation where they make a human being. And then there's a graphic glyph alongside Evan of the woman that's standing there with a space helmet, and there's a rod coming out, and there's a being dangling off it, and they're connected. This is part of that story there. So we found this sort of information and archaeology all over Australia. We found the largest UFO, we think, and Klaus Dorner has agreed with us, in the world. And it's only about 4 Ks from where the actual glyphs are.
Yeah, it's a larger version, a rock engraving of what's on those walls.
Oh, yeah, within those walls there are 8 UFOs.
Engraved into the rock?
Engraved in those walls. And what's interesting is the biggest UFO in the wall, we found another engraving we noticed straight away was identical in shape and form. Now, this one is 3.8 metres by 1.9. That's pecked into the ground. Oh, it's massive. Now, that's impressive, but what's really impressive about this story is that I did some measurements with some others, and we measured it against the largest glyph between the 2 walls. And do you know what happened? The width of the glyph between the 2 walls is 19 centimetres.
Right.
Of the glyph, the UFO is 190. 10 times larger. So we said, okay, we're going to use that factor of 10 for the vertical measurements. But there's one difference. The UFOs on the wall are all one story. The UFO on the platform, how many stories that got? 2 stories. And it's got a line through this semicircle making 2 stories. And I thought, it's double the size. When you go to the biggest glyph between the 2 walls, it is 7.5 centimetres in height. Multiply that by 20, that's 150. The one on the platform is 150 centimetres high, 2 stories. Then I measured the longest leg. The longest leg on the inside between the 2 walls is 8.4 times 20 is 168. The longest leg on the platform is 168. So what we found is those 3 measurements are down to the centimetre exact. Our argument is that's too much of a coincidence.
Why do you think it was done that way?
Because
exactly to scale.
To be exact about this story, because Arnie Bev Spears told us, and she took a long time telling us, didn't she, Evan? Finally, she said, the carriers from up there, because this is in their mythology too, and she's the last Darking Young Elder of that area, and we work with her extensively, crashed in the waters at Bambara. That UFO glyph overlooks the waters. It's right next to it. So we're starting to see a story there of something that's a lot deeper than just the Egyptian part of the story. They are crossing over.
And Australia is definitely not the only place that such rock carvings have been found. I mean, there are rock carvings around the world with the Native American Indians, also the Egyptians, where we see this kind of carving. How do you think it all links in together?
I think it's a global story. I think the whole thing's a global story. Look, something else we found, before we got involved in this, we were doing some archaeology in that region. We found an ankh, which is Thoth's major accompaniment, which was 10,000 years old. We've seen ibis men that are half Aboriginal, and the bottom half of them is Duramulin, the son of Byami, the great creation spirit, and the top half is Thoth. It's an ibis in profile form. We've seen an ape-man in profile form with an Egyptian headdress, and it's Thoth and Duramulin. What I'm getting at there is, we've seen Thoth with the sun and moon in 2 hands, and they call him Bulgandri. All the religious stories from Egypt come from Australia. You want Thoth, you'll find him in Australia. You want the god of inheritance, we can show engravings of that amongst Aboriginal engravings everywhere. All of this stuff comes out of Australia and was exported around the world. So when you talk about the mythology about the UFOs and the Egyptian story, you will find that it comes out of Australia first.
And now these glyphs at Carryong, is there anything that can actually date them, that shows the age of these glyphs?
No, there's 2 reasons why you can't, and there's a big problem because there's an argument about it being a fake. Now, the problem is there was a roof on top until 1960. Sealed it off completely, which means you're going to have a lot of trouble. And secondly, the Aboriginal women used to go up, and again, the elders told us this, they would go to the glyphs and clean the glyphs with women's urine and keep it sharp. So as a result, it was when a bulldozer drove over the top, making a rubbish tip, which Australians love to, collapsed, and the roof was then sealed off. So you can't get a date. But luckily, we're now working on another site where we can give a date. And we've got absolute proof the Egyptians were there. In fact, we had the president of the Australian Archaeological Society say this site was greater than Stonehenge.
You're joking. So can you explain a little bit about this site?
Yes, and we're going to send you the first pictures that have ever been shown outside 7 people that have seen this picture. In fact, all information bar this picture we're going to send and let you upload hasn't been sent anyone else. This is a crossover. It is 141 standing stones that were built on an artificial ridge that is 20 feet high and runs up at 45 degrees. We have absolute proof. When the first settlers came here in 1840, when they were burning the rainforest, which is what we do best, they found Aboriginal people on that site taking away 3 stones, so we know it's Aboriginal, original. Problem is, 20 foot high. The stones weigh, some of the stones weigh how many tons, Evan? Two
ton, and there's their origin, there's nowhere nearby. I think it's about 20-something kilometres.
20 k's away.
Yeah.
The problem is it's in the middle of a crater. It's igneous rock. They are all sandstone bar one, and some of them weigh 2 tons. The problem is, how does an Aboriginal person who doesn't have a wheel or a pulley get a 2-ton rock up a 45-degree slope and place it on the top?
Yes.
You have a problem here. It's a big problem. Secondly, it's sandstone. The closest sandstone quarry is 25 k's away. How does the original person pick up the 2-ton rock, move it 25 k's, then get it up the hill? You can't do it. We know who did it. The Egyptians did it. We know the Egyptians are masters of picking up rocks on boats and moving to other places. They may well have used that quarry. And this is the trick. The fascinating part of this story is we've got plenty of proof the Egyptians are around this area. We're doing that at the moment. That's not important right now. But we now have the first transcript by the archaeologist. We've got his notes, and we've read what the notes say. These 141 standing stones are called the mystery of life. It actually is a story about the history of the original people. And he's got that story there. And what we're going to do with you now is I'm going to share with you segments from these journals, which are now locked up. I'm going to read a couple of sections from them.
Just as a background, it's from the 1930s, isn't it?
It's from the 1930s.
Right.
What this gentleman did was they worked on this site. They worked on this site, and something happened to the site, and we'll get to that at the end of the story. And they worked through this, and they worked with the original people, and they transcribed it. Now, we've got the original words, which I won't read aloud because they're too sacred, but I am going to give you some of the transcriptions, and I'd like you to listen, see if you can pick up a recurring theme here, which tells you this is a 3-part story. This is what's written on these stones, and this is why this gentleman said it was the Australian head, but this is greater than Stonehenge. Guided by truth, man came to earth through darkness from light, of life that shines from far off. Truth brought out on wings to earth from God to man. I'm just reading different quotes here. Another one, how fire that brings the divine light from afar to the earth brings the soul to man. Now,
well, there certainly is a pattern there.
there is a pattern, and I suggest to you, when man came to earth through darkness, which is space, from light of life that shines far off, we're talking about Pleiades, but the best part of this story is right in the center of the 141 rocks is, and I'll read this to you, an arc of 7 stones leading from the big rock of igneous origin. Goes on to say that the stones are feminine.
They are what, sorry?
They are feminine. They represent water. Now, water is only feminine. Therefore, that is the 7 sisters. There's only one igneous rock on the whole thing. That's Orion. That's the story of the 7 sisters. And this is in the focal point at the center of this. This is a star map, and it's a story of their history. And it starts with, guided by truth, man came to earth through darkness from light of life that shines from far off. Same story we read between the walls. But this is far more elegant. The other one's got little symbols that we can read. This has
Yeah.
been done in a more. Now, this particular place, clever fellas and Kadija men would come to this one place that we found and do sacred ceremonies that no others were allowed to look at. And all the clever fellas and Kadija men from this region and all other regions came up to this place and would lay in trees when they died. This is a very sacred place, and we think this is a narrative about the Pleiadians coming from above, constructed by the Egyptians and given and directed by the original people. Now, what makes this story fascinating is that 4,500 years ago, this 20-foot artificially raised ridge, and they've all agreed it is, would have been the only thing above the sea level. You would have sailed all the way from the Pacific Ocean and you would have seen this boomerang-shaped construction and sailed to the port further on. 4,500 years ago, when the Egyptians were carving a carry-on, they were sailing up here, and this was a sacred place where they left a monument to the people who came from afar, or as Arnie Bev calls them, what's the words, Evan?
Oh,
carriers from up there. Carriers from up there, they call them.
The other thing with that is around the carry-on area, there's he's kind of like the Leonardo da Vinci of Australia.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
David Unithan.
Thank you, Evan. Yeah, look, what happened was there was a big argument about the UFO glyphs. We got slammed. People wrote books about us and they actually put videos up countering and saying what an idiot we were, because 1896, a white fella with a clipboard hired by the government, he came along and he asked an Aboriginal person, what's this thing here? And the Aboriginal fella said, oh, it's a whale, boss. And he's written that down, and that's the official version. And we got laughed at because we were told, no, it's a whale. One of the elders rang me up after we were really getting slammed. And I thought, oh, no, we're going to get in trouble off them too. We thought, oh, more trouble. And she said, no, you're right. You talked to Jerry Bostock. So Jerry Bostock rang us up and said, oh, no, they're spaceships with Pleiades. I said, how can I prove that? And he gave us the proof. On the $50 note in Australia, we have the only Aboriginal person, David Unithan. He was called by Wikipedia the Leonardo da Vinci of Australia. He invented the helicopter. He invented the electric shears, but had no money and no patent, so it was stolen off him. He went to Carry On. He is an elder. He's an Aboriginal person, and he told us what that UFO is. And what he said is this. He said, the first story is, for the young ones, it's a whale. But all whales in Carry On, not just the one we saw, but every whale is a starfish. They all represent carriers from up there. And the most prevalent icon up there, apart from 3,500 star markers we found within 5 Ks of the glyphs, 3,500 star markers, are hundreds of UFOs in the form of whales. This is a massive astronomical chart of what's taken place upstairs. They call it as on top, so below.
Right. And this structure, this amazing structure that's 20 feet in height, is that still standing or it's been destroyed?
Look, I didn't want it. Look, it all sounds great, doesn't it?
It does.
Because it is. Because we know the original people didn't make it. We know they couldn't do it. It's wonderful. The people who owned the site, and I'm not going to rubbish them, in the 1980s, they panicked. Mabo hadn't got through, Wick hadn't got through, and they bulldozed the whole structure. Now, before everyone groans and says, oh, my God, it's lost, it's not. We have the original map. They went out there and measured it up. We have the map, and we have the first map that was made, and we know where the stones were bulldozed to. Some were in parks that were that big and that amazing, and a lot of them have engravings on them, by the way. We know where they are. We will be approaching the council soon, and we'll be picking them all back up. We know where other ones have been placed. We have the original map. Some have been buried, and some have been buried in another place with concrete. We're going to take the concrete away. We're going to put it back.
Wow, that would be amazing to piece it back together to its original form.
This is the whole point of this. And I've spoken to all the elders. They know what we're doing. They're fully behind this. They're all going to get alongside now. We're going to put the thing back the way it was. And then maybe the ceremonies that belong to that site, maybe they can start again.
Yes.
But what that does, that is a monument to the original people being the first teachers. This was the Garden of Eden. It's a monument to that. But what it's also telling us is we have Egyptian technology, which is well known, and it's all over the place. And look, we've got plenty of other Egyptian monuments and stuff around here. We won't talk about the minor ones for now. They're coming out in our books, and they're coming out in a couple of documentaries. But more importantly, what it's got now is the whole of Australia. I've got to tell you too, back in Carry-On, we have evidence of earlier civilizations, much earlier civilizations. And I'm not talking hunter-gatherer civilizations. I'm talking about buildings, massive buildings. That's part of what was taking place here.
And what kind of evidence is there of that?
Oh, look, a lot. If I can go down to Carry-On, we are finding a lot of evidence. We're working extensively with Klaus Dorner on some revolutionary sort of technology I'm not allowed to talk much about, but within a 12-kilometre radius, we've got 150 different hits for different types of stuff that's going on there, which I can't be specific about, but I can with two. I can talk about the walls that we found. Last time we were down there, we found this massive set of walls, and Evan's writing that down because we'll send you pictures of it, and you'll see it. It's been mortared, stuck onto the cliff face. I've seen the mortar. And the cuts, I took a twig this fine and I stuck it in about 15 centimetres and it kept going. Look at that rock face and you will swear, you'll think it came out of Peru and South America. We've got a tunnel we found, haven't we, Evan? 75 metres, and I've got one section of wall there of about 8 metres by 4 horizontal layers of bricks. Each one is perfectly cut into the next one. Sometimes it goes like that, and they've cut them in together. Where's that?
Like what you do find in South America.
It's exactly the same.
Yes.
It's the same brickwork, and it's the same skill of masonry. This particular section I'm talking about holds up a rock shelf above that's falling in on this, but this wall, we've seen cuts that are actually 90 degrees, 180 degrees all over the place. There are ancient civilizations have been here. Now, what's fascinating about that particular wall we found, which goes for about 25, 30 metres, is near it is the most amazing rock. The most amazing rock we have ever seen. It's an insignificant little thing, and it's got an engraving on it. We filmed this, by the way. Luckily, it has been filmed. So what I'm going to tell you now, people can say, oh, you're making it up, but no, we filmed it. We knew about this rock. We were given this information from Klaus Dorner, right? We knew where to go. So we set the expedition, and the group went down in front of me. And the night before, one of the ladies there, Sonia James, just woke up and said, we have to take divining rods.
Take what, sorry?
Divining rods. You know those rods you hold and they spin and stuff, all that sort of stuff?
Oh, yes.
We've never done it. Yeah. None of us know nothing about it. But luckily, Sean, the cameraman, had been at Stonehenge and worked there, and he had to, didn't he, Evan?
Yeah.
So they brought him along. And they held him up. And as they held him up towards this particular symbol, which you're going to see. We're going to put that up to, give them that one, which is a scorpion. Crayfish. Well, I think it's a crayfish. In fact, it is a crayfish. Anyway, when they put it there, the rod started to spin around. And then we went to 4 other places in this same rock. And there were dialanthans marked out, which are markers the original people used for ley lines.
Right.
And we're thinking 4 in one rock, that can't be right. Every one of them. The rods spin really massively, big time. So we've done about 5 of these, and they're all spinning around there. And we're thinking, that's pretty unusual. Okay, so we go down, I go down later, and I go down with 2 other people. And we go on site and we do the whole thing again. But this is where it starts to get quite weird. So I've never done this stuff before, so I try it, and it spins, and it goes in one direction. It's particularly where that crayfish thing is. And then Ryan does it, and it spins too. And then the other guy, Gavin, does it. It doesn't move at all. And he's quite shocked by that. He says, I've been here before where I've held it backwards and held it down, and it spins. It doesn't for me every time. This is where it gets weird. But Gavin had walked all the way on site, really angry about something that had taken place before. He was really livid. The rock wouldn't spin for him.
So do you think it has some sort of energy, some kind of energy field relating to this rock, or what?
Yeah, but it's more than that. because we tend him to tell him to go away, and then Ryan and I went round the back, and we both held the rod, but when I held it, it spun clockwise. He'd hold it to the same piece of same dialanthen, and it would spin anti-clockwise. What I'm saying is this: not only is this rock giving up energy, but it's giving up energy, and the person who's receiving it is getting it in a different way. The three of us were all getting different reactions. Then I tried another experiment. I held that rod 3 feet away from this one spot, and it spun. I walked back 7 feet. It spun 360 degrees. I walked back 10 feet. It was still spinning. I didn't walk back further because there was a cliff behind me. I reckon I could have gone back 20 feet and held that rod, and it would spin 360 degrees.
So it spins 360 degrees and then stops?
Well, you don't even know to hold the damn thing. I just hold the middle like that. It just goes around like that. We have filmed it. We've filmed it. We've got film of this going on.
Wow.
Why are these walls protecting this rock? What is it they know about? What energy are these guys using? We don't even understand there. We know this energy coming out is not electromagnetic. We've tried that. It's not electric. It's not magnetic. It's not that. What is it? I'll give you one clue, but Sean, the cameraman, sat on top of it and had a vision immediately straight away, and I'm not going to say what that is because that's private. I ran my finger over the top of that crayfish, and I had a vision that night too, which is exactly the same one as Sean's. And here's the weird part of the story. That crayfish that's been engraved in that rock that looks really new and no one knows who's done it, Arnie Bev Spears, the dark young elder for that region, has a ring, doesn't she, Evan? It's exactly the same thing that's engraved in that rock, and she didn't do it.
Wow.
That's the totem, the original totem for this region. That's her totem. And
right.
We are standing on her totem, standing on top of this rock. The original people have marked out 4 dialanthans and this other engraving, which we'll send to you. It looks brand new, but it's engraved in a different way. It comes out a different colour to all the others. It's the one that's throbbing energy. So
incredible.
So these people, when I'm talking about ancient civilizations, I'm suggesting to you they were using different power sources than us too.
Yes. Well, this is a pattern again that's come out time and again with alternative researchers who've looked into things like the Bosnian Pyramid. I don't know if you've heard much about that, but they have done, these readings using special equipment which have shown a type of energy coming out of the top of the pyramid, which is not in line with, regular scientific understanding. And what we see time and again is we start to realize actually how much we don't know about our past and the types of technology they had, the types of knowledge they had. It seems like there's just this incredible wealth of information that we just don't know yet.
No, we don't. But the beauty of it is you've got that rock there, but we've also got engravings all around this region of spacemen. So, I mean, basically what this area in Carry-On is doing, we've got, in fact, Arnie Bev just told us quite recently, because I kept saying none of these guys are, the next, they've all got helmets on. All of the heroes don't they? And Arnie Bev finally told us, because I asked her, I said, they've got to be helmets. And she said, yes, we call them hats. So we've got helmeted people running around everywhere. As I said, we have, I think 3,500 star markers within about 3 or 4 Ks of this particular where the engravings are. What the original people have done here, once people wake up to themselves, is they've given us the history of humanity. And it's all engraved in rock. And what people have got to realise, the Bosnian periods are important, and they certainly are. But in some respects, if people are prepared to take their blinkers off, this place we've got here is probably more important, because in this one, they've left us 2 records. One in the 141 standing stones, and by the way, near it are other structures that take up 500 and 600 stones we won't talk about now that are on the floor of this alongside it. Then you've got that elegant story. It's about good and evil, by the way. I can tell you at the start, it highlights those 141 standing stones. Start this with a narrative about good and evil and the passage we have to go through. It's a really mystical story. And then you've got that at the esoteric level, up where we're working, down in the practical level in Carry-On. They've said, well, look, just in case they don't get it, we'll write it all in rock for them. We'll put the whole story in rocks. So if they don't get the story up near where we are up near Byron Bay, we'll put one down in Carrying, and surely even the dumbest whitefellas will work this out. What we got from the dumbest whitefellas, we actually had this story up in the ABC radio. It's national news as a second item.
Yeah.
December the 10th last year, because we took them on site and showed them some other stuff. Because we found other sets of hieroglyphs apart from the ones between the walls. She put it up within 1 hour, 2 hours rather. It was the second item, 1 minute 40 seconds. Very pro us. It went off every station in Australia. And the website article was taken down too. So we are fighting a group that don't want this truth out.
Yes.
And
so you faced a lot of censorship, not just on that occasion, but I believe on a number of occasions with radio, with TV, with websites. You're continuing to be censored. Do you think we will ever reach a time where mainstream science, archaeology, history will start to accept that what we know about our human origins is very different to what's published in the history books now?
Yeah, we will, because the elders have told me, and Evan knows this too. We know what they're going to show us. We even know the date, and we can't tell you that. They've got evidence. Look, these people, the original people, have been here for hundreds of thousands of years. They kept their story intact. When we came here 200 years ago, they didn't tell us because we didn't ask. We just took everything. But they kept it. They are giving it up. That's why we're doing what we're doing. We've got so much stuff. We've got so many things we can't talk about, and so many things I didn't mention today. We could go on for hours with what we've been shown. But I know for a fact that what we have up here, what I'm talking about now, this is not the only thing we're looking at. And I know what I've been told by the elders, what they've got. I've been told more than once, the stuff that if it's true, and they've never lied to us and we've never been misled so far, what we will be given soon and what we're about to be given and what we've even found with those standing stones. The standing stones are the gateway to a much bigger story. And both down at Carryong, down at Kangaroo Island, up where we are now, further up, they've all got this stuff up in the middle, Pigeon Jet Jar. They all have truth. They have artifacts and truth they're going to give up. And we know when they're going to give up.
Publicly.
We got into trouble, didn't we, Evan?
Yeah.
Big trouble from the Council of Elders because we were ahead of them. We raced ahead of it. And we've been asked to pull back on some things, but we are allowed to go ahead. But everything we do, whatever I said to you now, every word's been checked by elders first. They watch everything we do. But we are ahead of them. We're allowed to go ahead because we were given that right, because when I was given ceremony by Kano Walker from the Ramangeri, we were given the right to speak for Wirrachin. So our job is to get out stuff I find that's given to us, like this information I'm giving you now about the 141 standing stones. This was found by a gentleman called Richard Patterson in the Historical Society, and I know it's going to sound like X-File. He decided to look around the back room and find the most difficult place, and there he found a folder, unmarked folder in black, and that's where he found this information, and then rang us. So these sort of things are coming out now. Why did Richard find it now? Because the elders want him to find it. The elders are running this. They want this information out, and it will come out. And what we're finding up there, the first part of it, when you put Carryong and what we've got up in our region together, we substantiate the Egyptians were definitely here. But there's so many questions are being asked about why did they come? Why were there civilizations here before? Because according to the original people, and we believe this is the case, we actually think it probably happened at Carryong, don't we? Yeah. They landed there and they began their genetic experiments there. And according to Auntie Bev, this is what she said. This is not my words, hers. She said, they got so numerous here, didn't they, Evan? They had to send them out to stop the words that she used, not mine, inbreeding. And you'll find in Carryong, you'll find every art style in Australia is in Carryong. But we think the Wanjians are just up the top end. No, they're in Carryong too. You think dot art is just in the middle. Or Mimis. They're all in Carryong. We found them all. Yeah. This could be the beginning place where the breeding begins. And this higher race, what they're trying to look for is something, a wonderful cross between human and Pleiadian. That's what begins here. And we think it begins here and then goes out from here. The date we're not sure about. 400,000, 800,000. We know it's ancient. We know that much for sure.
So there's evidence pointing to the fact that it's at least 400,000. Is that right?
Definitely. In fact, all respect to Michael Morwood. When he found the hobbits, he's now dead, rest in peace, he also found evidence at Flores of a boat journey of at least 20 kilometres. Flores is the second closest island to Australia. Remember that? And people came to there 800,000 years ago by boat. And it had to be enough people to live, which means you've got to have 20 people to stop inbreeding. You think about this. They say, oh, they must have come from Indonesia, because that's the way they're trained to think. But 20 kilometres, 20 people, if you can do that, you can do 100 kilometres with 20 people. So where they come from. But we've got a boat journey taking place then. And by the way, the painting of the oldest boats in the world are found in Australia. They could be 50,000 years old. And those boats, the Graham Walsh found, have 23 to 29 people in the two boats, enough to start a population elsewhere. So yes, they've been in other places. The work in America right now, they are finding Aboriginal skulls all over America, everywhere.
So that indicates that the Aborigines started, or let's say the original people started in Australia and then went out from Australia to populate other countries rather than actually the reverse.
Exactly. And you'll find they're not finding any African genes in America. They are finding original genes. Walter Neves put together 55 complete skulls of original people. In fact, Cosmos last year did an article, didn't they, Evan? Year before, saying, are the Americans Australian Aboriginals? It was the front page. It's well known in America. The reason why all our books are published by University Press in America is we make a big issue about the fact the original people are also went to America rather. It's part of the same story. They were everywhere.
Well, Stephen, Evan, thank you so much for everything you've shared. You've shared an incredible wealth of information, and I'm extremely intrigued about what's to come. You mentioned that some evidence, some piece of information is eventually going to go public, which will really reveal the truth behind our human origin. So I'm very intrigued about that, and also really looking forward to seeing the photographs you have of some of these structures you've been talking about. So thank you so much for everything. It's really, really interesting.
It's our pleasure. Thanks for asking. Thank you.